I'll just need.
Oh, sorry. I don't know if that test tells you recording in progress out loud every time.
That's okay. I clicked the I got it button. Let's need. Do I have access to share my screen? Hold on.
I think you should be able to.
Okay, I do. So I'm going to do my screen share. All right. So you all see my presentation?
Yep.
Oddly enough, it's on. I was doing some edits to it. I had a presentation with the school a few nights ago, and I realized I had some 2021 dates, and I'm like, I really need to change this to 2022. So, all right, here we go. Well, I want to thank you all for inviting me to speak with your club. I'm Tisha Johnson. I'm the Senior Director of Admissions for ICO. Just a little bit about me. I'm a native Chicagoan, so I've been here all my life. Been at ICO for over 15 years. This coming February will be 16 years. My team and I are responsible for everything admissions related. So engaging with prospective students, running the admissions cycle, everything pretty much up until orientation. And then we hand it off to one of our student affairs team members, and she coordinates the orientation for new students. Though you will, if you attend ICO, you will see us being engaged with orientation, as we typically will assist her with different events and the planning process as well. In my role at ICO, I also serve as an admissions committee member. So I'm on the admissions committee making decisions regarding applicants' bios, as well as an interviewer. So if you interview with ICO, you may have me as your interviewer. I think I'm a good interviewer, but I always leave that to the students to decide. And this year, for anybody who's applying, we understand that you all cannot, well, I've heard recently you can cross the border, but the challenge is getting back into Canada. So essentially, you really can't, leave to come in, leave this country to come in for your interviews. We are doing virtual interviews. So, definitely keep that in mind if you're planning to apply to ICO. So just a little bit about ICO. I don't know if anybody has been to Chicago. We are situated probably about a good, 10-minute ride from the city center downtown. So most people who know about Chicago may go into downtown and may see the Bean or go to one of our museums like the Art Institute or to Navy Pier. If you're more sort of on Michigan Avenue by the Bean or the Art Institute, there's a bus you can take straight down Michigan Avenue that brings you to our campus, or you can drive straight down, and typically in non-rush hour, you can get here in about 10 minutes. So we are nicely located, not too far, so not in the hustle and bustle of downtown, but close enough that you can get there pretty easily. At ICO, we're known for our clinical education. The Illinois Eye Institute is attached to our campus. So this picture here is of our front entrance. So if you're ever coming to ICO, this is the building you need an interest you should be looking for. On the flip side is our patient entrance. So our buildings are attached. We do have one detached building, which is across the street, which is our residential complex, which I'll talk about shortly. So I want to talk a little bit about the curriculum. So 4 years full time. If you look at our website, you will see our curriculum is posted, and it provides you a good overview of what you can expect during your time in the program. That first year curriculum, you're going to notice nothing but science courses with labs. So a lot of anatomy, physiology, you have optics, you have biochemistry, to name a few. So it's important as an undergraduate student to, especially if you're a non-science major, is to take multiple science courses together to, as best as you can, replicate what you're going to get in professional school. Just so when you do make that transition into the program, you've had a couple of terms under your belt where you have had multiple science courses together. You'll see in our program, we also have students starting in the clinic. They will start in year one. It starts more of as observation, but as you progress through your curriculum into the winter and spring quarters, you're going to be taking classes that will prepare you to use the clinical instruments. So pre-entrance testing, and then moving on to the phoropter and slit lamp. In that first year, that pre-interest testing that you're learning, that's what you're going to start doing in the clinic under the direction, if you will, of a third year student. You're going to be partnered with a third year. And so as you're doing your practicals and working on your clinical skills, you will start then working with patients in that regard. Do know that all the work that students do in a clinic, of course, will be under watch of an attending. So there's always going to be a professor there who's going to make sure that you know, are doing your due diligence and that you're doing a comprehensive eye exam and that you don't forget anything. So don't worry and feel like, all right, as a first year, that may be a lot to ask, but it gives you an opportunity to start putting what you've learned in the lab into an actual setting with your patients, because you will do a lot of practice with each other, but by default, you all will know, sort of know what is expected from you as a patient versus actually having a patient who gives you that real life situation and experience. So that program is called our clinical assistance program. In between year 1 and 2 of optometry school, in our program, you have the summer off. When you return as a second year, then you're going to be in the program year round. We do have a couple of academic programs that students can apply and interview for. And if they get selected, they'll spend their summer here in Chicago, either doing research in the research program or doing our accelerated clinic program. And in the program, you're going to you're going to take 3 classes actually out of the second year curriculum and take them over this summer. Both of these programs have a limited enrollment. The research program is capped at about 6 students, and the accelerated clinic program is 6 to 8 students. So it's not, you know, campus-wide type of thing. It's going to be just a small group of students who participate each year. But the good majority of students will not do, you know, either program. And there's no, you know, disadvantage to, you know, not doing either program. Some students just want a break. They want to go home. They maybe want to travel, relax a little bit before coming back to campus and doing a year-round program from that point in second year. Some of the benefits of doing the accelerated clinical program is that those 3 classes you took in your summer session, of course, you will not have to take during your second year, and you have a slightly lesser load, if you will. And the other benefit is that when it comes time for the next summer to start selecting your externship sites, you'll do that a year later. You get first dibs at the externship site. So, you know, some perks, but again, it's really personal preference if students want to participate in the program. And there's no, again, advantage or disadvantage. Get my little alarm going. Whether or not you do the program. Second year, again, 3 quarters, you're having now more of your clinical science coursework and labs. You increase your patient care experience in primary care. So first year, you're partnering with the third year. Second year, you're actually going to be partnering with the fellow second year. So you all will go into the clinic and be in the clinic once a week in the fall and winter quarters, and you will assist each other. So for instance, if me and Michael Smith were partnered together in the clinic, one week I would serve as the scribe, and the next week he would serve as the student clinician doing the actual eye exam. And then we switch off. New this year for our program, in the spring quarter, second years actually start seeing patients by themselves. We sort of got a little pilot of this lab this past academic year with COVID, and second year students were required to, when they get back to campus last August, actually see patients by themselves, where they were expecting to be partnered with the fellow patient. And a lot of that had to do with the COVID requirements that were out in regard to social distancing. So they couldn't allow that many people to be in a room. So had a good idea of what that would be like. And so the institution, you know, moved forward with making that part of the program for our students this year. You will then also work in the eyewear center. And if you worked in an OD's office, you probably are, you know, very familiar with it. There's always going to be an optical part of it. So you're going to help patients select frames, select lenses, make sure they're fitting properly once they come back and they're picking up their glasses, as well as doing some minor repairs. So you do work in the eyewear center year 2, 3, and 4 of our program. Year 3, you move into the specialty coursework now. And now you're doing patient care, continuing solo, but this solo is multiple times a week. During that second year in that third term, you're doing it just once a week. Now as a third year, you're going to have multiple shifts in primary care, seeing patients solo, unless you're assigned a first year to work with. You then also get early patient experiences in our specialty suites. So for instance, I believe it was this past April, I came into the clinic to get my eyes examined and my contact lens wear as well as glasses. And so the student who saw me actually was a third year student. So that was her rotation through contact and able, work the patient and sort of getting a feel for what she'll be doing during her fourth year in the program, whether it's going to be at ICO or one of her other externship sites. So you get a chance to dabble in some specialties. Maybe for anybody who's considering the residency, it gives you a chance to sort of see what working in that particular specialty would be like as well. Like I mentioned, you'll continue working in the eyewear center, as well as working at our offsite clinic, II Princeton, which is located about 2 miles south of campus. And that's where Chicago public school students from elementary school up through high school will come to get their eyes examined by our students and our doctors. Typically, they have failed vision screenings on their own campus, and they're coming to our campus to get seen for a comprehensive eye exam. And then lastly, I think for some students, maybe, the best year of all, no more coursework in the program. Is nothing but externship rotations. We do have a requirement that students have to do one here in the IEI, but then the others can be, in Canada, across the US, and abroad. We do have a couple of international sites, 2 in China, 1 in Australia, half quarter, I believe it's in Spain, as well as United Arab Emirates. So you get a chance to, stretch your legs. I haven't heard if those have reopened. I know a lot of countries are still pretty much closed, if you will, for visitors coming in. But hopefully by the time you all, if you're coming to ICO, and this is probably about 3 or 4 years out, do have that opportunity to go abroad, I always encourage students to do so. And as mentioned previously, you will have opportunities to work in the various areas of what we call the mandatory areas of focus. So you're going to get experience again in PEDS, contact lens, working in low vision, working in pediatrics. So you can definitely get sort of that broad experience, if you will, in your optometric training. So sort of in a nutshell, that's ICO's curriculum. On our YouTube channel, we do have a video that actually highlights the different areas of our clinic. It's under residencies because pretty much for each of those specialties listed, we have a residency slots, but it gives you an idea, a little bit of what it looks like in our clinical setting here at ICO. So as I mentioned, you're going to get the bulk of your training in the IEI, which is attached to our building. I always encourage students to do like a Google map, and if you Google map ICO, you'll see it's essentially one city block here in Chicago, in addition to the residential complex across the street. So unlike your university, which I have not been there, but I would assume like most universities is expansive. So it's probably taken, several blocks. And in some cases, maybe, I know some schools and universities, they're large and it may even be a mile long. So definitely a much smaller place here at ICO. So the type of patients that you're going to see at ICO, will vary in terms of age, ethnicity, gender, you name it, and even what they present with. Like I said, I'm a patient. I think I'm a relatively healthy patient, if you will. I don't have any other, any systemic issues that I'm dealing with or any that are impacting my vision. But you're going to see patients who will range from, say, as young as 6 months all the way to 100 years old. And sometimes people will assume that the older you are, the more issues you have, which is kind of true, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's that patient coming into your clinic. You can have a 100-year-old come in and they have no other issues and they're just getting their eyes checked. And it could be the 6-month-old that has a variety of ocular issues that you'll need to address. So it's really a diverse patient population. And that's what we're known for. Um, You'll see that we have, like I mentioned earlier, a variety of specialty suites at ICO. We have 4 different primary care suites. That's where it's sort of a good bulk of our patient population will come through. We do have urgent care on that campus, so that's manned by our residents. They do get a pager that they have to man and answer calls. And I would say it's not sort of like your typical doctor's office where you may feel like, all right, how often is this patient going to go off? How many calls am I getting? Essentially, someone can call our main line for clinic. It's an emergency. They can get, pushed through to leaving a message for our residents. They'll get notified on a pager and then they'll call the patient back. And if they feel it's something that needs to be seen right now versus, waiting to the next business day, because our campus is manned by our public safety department 24/7, 365, somebody is always here. So the doctor can call in, let them know that they're coming in and having a patient come in. Security can let the patient in, and the doctor walk the patient up to our exam rooms, and sit sort of outside the exam room, of course, and wait till the patient's done being seen by the doctor. So that's sort of how our urgent care is run. We have a diabetic center. Being in the city of Chicago, we do have a heavy African American and Hispanic population, and those 2 populations definitely have a high diabetic rates. And so having, high patient population that we've seen that have diabetes, they have a sort of, different needs that may be need to be addressed for their eye care. So we have the diabetic center where that's where those patients will get seen to make sure that they're monitoring, their eye health, given that some can have issues related to diabetes impacting their vision. So definitely sort of an important thing for the institution to look at. And I want to say we started that center probably about 4 or 5 years ago on campus. So that's sort of like the academic side in terms of clinic as well as programming for students. The residential complex, as I mentioned earlier, is right across the street from campus. Most of our students coming in as first years, about 70% will stay in the RC. It makes it easy, especially if you're coming from Canada, that you don't have to worry about trying to come back and or even come to look at apartments and whatnot. It gives you the convenience of being close to campus without having to, again, do apartment searches and what have you. You have a lot of good features here in that you will have sort of recreational space, if you will. Each floor has a lounge. The first floor, if you can see in that photo there, they have foosball tables, pool tables. So a space for you to hang out, spaces for you to study. Each floor has a study room. And on the 4th floor of the building, we have apartments. And they have full-size kitchens, so refrigerator, stove. All the rooms are furnished, so you're pretty much bring your clothes and linens with you if you're staying here. It's not mandatory that you stay in the RC. It is optional. So if you decide, you know what, maybe I don't want to necessarily be that close to campus. Some students say that, or they maybe just don't want a roommate situation. We provide our students an off-campus housing guide the summer that they are going to be entering into the program. So you also have some options of websites and/or apartment complexes around campus that you can look at if you're interested in living off campus. The students after first year, actually a good majority will move out of the RC and they will move into some of those apartments around campus or in this area that we call the South Loop, which is between where ICO is in Bronzeville and in the downtown area. And a couple of things about student life. I always encourage students when you get into optometry school, yes, you're going to be busy with school, but we always encourage students to be involved, whether you are, a member at large or you get involved with the board of different student organizations, definitely participate. So we are a very active campus. We have a lot of different events throughout the year. Last year, a lot of these things were, put on hold to this year. Students maybe did things more virtually in terms of meetings as well as, quiz nights, movie nights, those type of things where they can still be engaged, but did so, under social distancing guidelines. This year, a little bit different in Chicago. We don't have our social distancing guidelines. Of course, we on campus are required to be masked unless you're in your office or in your cubicle, and our students adhere to that with their social events as well. But like I said, I always encourage students just to get involved. There are plenty of opportunities, whether it's fundraising for school supplies or doing the annual blood drive we have here. We have some organizations that sort of give back to ICO students. This picture up here on the left is of MCA Nights, our Multicultural Student Association. Each year they would do a talent show. So faculty, staff, students could display their talents. Sometimes it's singing, sometimes it's dancing, sometimes it's sort of dress attire for different cultures. And usually before that, we used to have sort of like a big potluck, if you will. And so people would bring in different things where everyone could buy them, all in an effort to raise fund for the Multicultural Student Association Scholarship, which goes back to students. So a lot of different things that happen on campus. So I always encourage students definitely get involved. Um, if students are looking for opportunities sort of abroad, if you will, we have that as well. We have a group, SPOSH, which is Students for Volunteer Optometric Services to Humanities. They go abroad to provide eye care to needy patients. And this picture was actually from this past August. A group went down to St. Lucia. And so they go during their break week. So in between quarters, they'll go. So if you're looking to do something out of the States, this is a good group to get involved with. Most students only do, one trip in their academic program. Some are fortunate enough to do two. It, of course, does cost to get to these countries, and you're paying some costs related to your housing as well. But it's a good way to give back. So, I always tell students, keep that in mind. Or other organizations we have on campus. We have some, honor societies. We have some faith-based organizations. Of course, have a lot of sort of optometry-centered organizations. I mentioned this a little bit earlier, and I don't think everybody was on the call at that time, but we do have a Canadian Student Association on our campus as well. And I also offered that if anybody has any questions and want to engage with the current students who's from Canada, please let me know and I'd be more than happy to put you in contact with our students. As I mentioned, I put it in the chat, a link to our blogs. We've had a couple of our Canadian students write blogs in the transition from Canada to the US. So hopefully that can serve as sort of a resource for you as you're considering applying to optometry schools in the US and wondering what that process will look like for you as an applicant, as a student. And then lastly, sort of in my talk about ICO support services, I think, it's one of the things, I always encourage students to look at. We do have a variety of academic support as well as professional support. When you come into ICO, do know that, if you need tutoring assistance, it's there. It's of no charge to you. We do have a counseling and psychological services team on campus. That's again of no charge to you unless you're doing some type of assessments, but there are definitely people and services in place to assist you. Your professors are there. We have peer coaching. So don't feel as if, you are sort of lost because we're such a small campus. And even though we have a larger class size, this year we brought in 117 first-year students. I've been here where we brought in as many as 170 first-year students. Your faculty do get to know you. You will spend a lot of time in a classroom with them as well as in the lab. So your professors who are teaching in your classes are also teaching you in your lab. So you really do get a chance to get to know them. And when it comes to sort of the professional side of things, I think sometimes students will say, well, I don't have to worry about that until fourth year when I'm getting ready to look for my first professional position. But what our Department of Career Services or Career Development will do for you is really prepare you starting year one with a lot of skills that you're going to use in the program that helps prepare you for that um, fourth year professional opportunity. And so that could be networking, that could be CV review or CV. They do CV reviews, but they also do a class on how to write a CV, how to do interviews, do mock interviews with you, provide events where we have alumni and vendors come on campus and engaging with you, telling you about their start in optometry, talking about their modality that they are practicing in, the specialty they're practicing in, and giving you an insight to some of these as it will hopefully guide you into, maybe considering doing a specialty or a residency or giving you some more insight uh, of what it's like to be, say, in an OD/MD setting, or to be a military doctor, or to be a pediatric optometrist. So it's definitely one of those things where you get it from year one. A lot of events are required, so you will have opportunities to engage over your 3 to 4 years in the program. If you're a fourth year, if you're on campus that spring when the event happens, then of course you're required to be there. But if you're at externship site across the country or out of the country, there's no requirement for you to attend. So that's a little bit about sort of ICO, who we are, what we do. Any questions about anything I mentioned before I tell you how to get into ICO? Okay, I see no one's unmuted, so I'm assuming there are no questions. I didn't say this at the beginning, but definitely feel free to put your questions in the chat or to just mute yourself and ask your questions. I feel like I get most of the questions when I talk about the requirements to get in. So I think you guys are waiting for that part. So a little bit about our requirements. Most of you all are probably going to be biological science majors. And we don't have a preference for majors. I encourage students, if you're in the sciences, it's usually a little bit better in that you're going to get all of your prerequisites, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, built into your program. So that sort of makes it easier versus say, maybe somebody who's an English major where you're going to have to work with your advisor to get your prerequisites built in addition to taking your major courses for your English degree. Most students are going to come in with the bachelor's degree, but you don't have to. If you are somebody who's maybe a first, second year, and you know optometry is what you want to do, and you are fine with foregoing your bachelor's degree, you can do that. Do know that we're going to look at your academic record a little more closely because instead of having 3 years under your belt like most applicants do, you're only going to have 2. So we want to make sure that you're on track. If anybody is interested in applying as a non-degree student, you can definitely reach out to me and we can do a counseling session to sort of see where you are and where you need to be in order to sort of do this and be successful in it. But as you see, more than 95% of our students come in with a bachelor's degree, so it's totally a personal decision. And each year that number will vary a little bit. Some years it's been as low as like 92% have come in with a bachelor's degree, sorry. So our requirements, I'll ask, does your university have rather a plus minus system or is it a straight letter grade? I know most of you all are numeric, but I guess the question would be if you get like the equivalency of like minuses in any of your coursework, or is it straight, this is an A, this is a B, this is a C?
We do have like A+, B+, B-, that kind of thing.
Okay, all right. So if where your numeric grade lands, if it is a C- or lower for any of these prerequisites, you would have to retake them. So it's important to, keep that in mind. C's are betters for the prerequisites, but if we, and usually if students apply and, or if they have questions before applying, I always refer them to the back of their transcript, and there's usually like a little legend that'll tell you this percentage equals this letter grade. So that's essentially what you would follow. But if you have questions, feel free to reach out to us and we can work with you on that. So yeah, so that's, one of the most important things, more of a US thing in terms of AP credit. So I'm not sure, I have not seen any Canadian applicants have AP credit, but I think the biggest thing for you all is really more of the letter grades and making sure, you have that as a C or better. So those are the required ones. These are some recommended ones. I would say for sure, anatomy, physiology, and biochemistry. As I mentioned, you're going to have these in your first year curriculum. So it's important, but again, not mandated that you have these courses because they will actually help you. A lot of students have said having these courses, a lot of current students have said having these courses help them in that, well, what you tend to focus on will in some cases be full body, but eventually navigate to just being ocular anatomy or physiology, that having that background in the course has been helpful. So again, not required, but I say highly recommended. And for anyone who's a non-science major, definitely taking those courses and any additional human-related biological sciences that you can get under your belt would be good. Any questions about the prereqs? Nope. All right, no questions. So a little bit about the number side of things. So this past year had over 1,000 people apply for seats in our program. This the numbers here will give you a snapshot, if you will, of our entering class profile in terms of where people landed with their test scores, where their grades are. I typically tell applicants, if you're in the threes, from the numeric side of things, you're usually in a good spot. It doesn't guarantee accept admittance, but it's one of those things where if you look at the numbers, people who are in the threes tend to fare a little bit better than applicants who are what I would call in the twos. So if your GPA is usually 3.0 and higher, your OATs are 300s and higher, you stand to fare a good chance of getting accepted. Now, granted, other things get looked at within those numbers, so it isn't just, all right, looking at the GPA and checking the box. We will look at your trend in grades. Did Rebecca Smith start poorly at university and her grades trended up, or was she trending high initially and then had a dip and didn't recover, or did she have a dip and go up? So we will look at that. We'll look at your lows as well. We'll see how many credits you're carrying each quarter. We'll look at the number of sciences versus non-science. So a lot of things go into our evaluation of your GPA. We really want to know, how did that 3.4 or that 2.9 come about? So average GPA at 3.4, but we've had GPAs, as the chart will show you, had 17 people come in with GPAs on 3.0. I want to say, I don't have all top of my head. I did this report back in September, maybe as low as maybe a 2.7, could have been a 2.6. I think for sure, maybe a 2.7. But everybody is different, and that's where looking at their academic history comes into play, because I know some applicants will say, well, all right, Tisha, so how did a 2.7, get accepted into the program? Really, it just depends. Some cases, applicants had a struggle. Maybe when they got to university, they didn't buckle down like they should have and struggled initially and had a bad first year. I had someone that, for example, started college that first year, ended up with like a 2.3. And they knew that, all right, my long-term goal is to go into professional school, and grades like this will not cut it. And I need to do better whether improving my study habits, working with the professors or TAs, become a better student so I can have a better chance of getting in. And this person, worked on their time management skills as well and ended up improving. And for the second and third year of their program, um, get up to, I think it was like a 3.6 and a 3.5 cumulative GPA. So, it definitely is possible. Maybe some students that are trending good and then maybe they get ill or a parent get ill. Something has happened where it's impacted their academics. So those things happen. In Optomcast, you can talk about those things, but we really look closely at, especially if it happens sort of like mid-program, what happened afterwards? Were you able to get your grades up? Was that last year of coursework, AB type of coursework? So if anybody has questions about their academics, I mean, this applies to any of you. You can always reach out to us and we do counseling sessions. But I always try to stress it to those who feel like, I'm not sure about my academics and I want to speak to someone. Don't hesitate, reach out to us. We can set up a Teams meeting, a virtual meeting, do it over the phone, and get some information from you, take a look at your transcripts and give you some feedback on where we see you need improvement, if any. Sometimes students reach out to us and they are 3.5 GPAs and they just sort of want reassurance that so far what they're doing puts them on the right track, and we can do that too. Any questions about GPAs or grades or academics? All right. OAT. I suspect as a club, you guys probably have talked about this. People who have taken the OAT hopefully have shared their experiences and gave you some insight on this exam or how to have a successful exam. So some of the information in the blue box may be repetitive and some of it could be new. I always stress, definitely give yourself enough time to take the OAT, do the timed practice exams, and take those results with a grain of salt. I hear usually from applicants that they're scoring well on the practice and they get an exam and didn't do well, or the reverse happens. They do poorly on the practice and they get an exam and they do well. I think one of the important things is to look at the OAT user guide and review for each section of the OAT the content that's in there and use that as a starting point to help you prepare for it. While we do have a May 1st deadline, I highly encourage you to not apply or take your OAT at the deadline. And here's why. If you're taking the OAT May 1st and we get, Michael Green's OATs and they are, let's just say, didn't do well at all and he got all 220s across the board, and you all know that 200 is the lowest and 400 is the highest. All 220. So we're going to come back to Michael Green and say, you need to retake. But Michael has to wait 90 days. That puts him at August 1st. And in theory, he should be starting our program within 2 weeks. So I always encourage students, definitely think about the timing of it. Make it earlier so you can have that 90-day window to retake it and still be considered for the cycle. Could he take it August 1st? And still get accepted? Possibly, if he already had his interview and we were waiting for these scores. Otherwise, if this was his first time, applying and it was May 1st and we had to wait for these new scores on the same day he took his OAT, it makes it really hard at that point to try to interview him and bring him in for that same cycle. So while it's nice to have this delayed application date, we did find this past year it also impacts applicants because some applied in August, they get interviewed in May, get accepted May, June, but just weren't ready to make that transition to ICO in 2 months. So I always encourage applicants, the sooner that you can apply, the better. So a little bit about sort of the softer side, that was the numeric side. Some other things that we look at: communication skills, your knowledge in the profession, And while rarely are these an issue for an applicant, most of you all have great communication skills. You've done your research and you know the profession is for you. Do realize that a lot of these things here get reviewed really more during the interview process. So your communication skills are going to get assessed in a couple of places. So in OptomCast, in your writing samples that you do, we have 2 different essays in it that you'll write about. But then, of course, you do your in-person or virtual interviews. So your verbal communication skills, your knowledge of the profession, just making sure that you have a good idea of what you're getting into, what the profession is all about. No one's going to ask you about any optometric terminology. I know I won't. I'm not an OD, so I wouldn't dare put anybody on the spot. But it's really just making sure that you have a good sense of optometry, say, versus ophthalmology, say, versus being an optician. Knowing, again, what this career is all about is going to be key. And sometimes that comes through with your letters of recommendation as well, in terms of your optometrist being able to provide us some insight on either your work with them, maybe you are lucky enough to work in an OD setting, or your observations with them and your engagement with them. Same thing for your academic letter, whether it's your science professor or your advisor, really giving us some insight as to who you are. Sometimes I see letters that say, Michael Green is a great student. He earned an A in my biochemistry course and he came to every course. That's, really not one that can provide us a lot of insight. So finding that person who maybe you've had a few classes with, someone who can write you what we call a strong letter of recommendation. And lastly, something that as an applicant you can do, but I always encourage you, if you're maybe a year or two out from applying, really assess your strengths and weaknesses. I think all of us can probably point out our strengths. And I think probably quite a few of us can also point out our weaknesses as well. But if you have weaknesses related to your application, definitely come up with a plan to improve them. So if your grades are not adequate, if your OAT isn't, definitely work on getting those up to par so you can have a successful application. All right, so I pretty much already talked about the deadline. Don't wait to apply, apply early. And some of the benefits of that, and you guys probably know some of these, but just want to point out, applying at the beginning of the cycle, one, if anybody's looking for scholarship dollars, the pot is fullest at the beginning of the cycle. And because we work on rolling admissions, of course, that pot will shrink. So let's say, I'll throw a number out there. So if we have $500,000 in a scholarship, June 30th, by May 1st, I would actually take that back. It's typically before May 1st. Sometimes it can be as early as say January or February, where, all right, my purse essentially is empty. I've awarded and people have accepted it, meaning that they've deposited and secured their scholarship. And then we also have offers out there that are waiting. We've accepted students and offered them money, so we're waiting to hear back whether or not they're going to accept. So definitely, scholarship dollars are one. So if you're someone who's definitely interested in scholarships, and everyone gets considered for scholarships, there's no separate process. Applying early is important. I think for your peace of mind, applying early gives you that opportunity to say, I know where I'm going. I'm done with the application process, and now I can focus on finishing up my undergrad degree, and then start getting ready to join, set optometry school in August. So definitely important in that regard. And I think lastly, it gives us, the admissions office, an opportunity to work with you. If you're applying May 1st, everything has to be really on point to have a successful application. If you apply, let's say, even now, maybe you're in school and the committee reviews your file and says, you know what, Rebecca, we want to see your fall grades, or we want you to retake the OAT. You have time to do so. When you're applying at the deadline, you really don't have that luxury of being able to say submit more coursework, and in some cases retake the OAT and get your results up. So that's why I always stress the applicants definitely looking at the deadlines and making sure that you can try to do things as soon as possible. And I also know, I mean, given this past year, a lot of students had delays. I feel like it's a little bit calmer now, but we just don't know what can happen with COVID, and that you have your testing date, say, set for December 1st, and the testing center may close and say, due to uh, uptick in COVID. And so they push you back to January. We definitely had a lot of that last year. I mean, and we work with students. I mean, it was nothing that they could control, of course, um, but it's building in that buffer in case that happens to you. I had an applicant recently where that happened. They ended up, and this was even just earlier this year, where I think they had a date maybe for January, February, then it got pushed to April, then ended up taking it in May, right around the time that they were graduating. So, um, just sort of be mindful of those things when you're planning your testing dates. Uh, the CAS, I think you all should be familiar with OptomeCast. If not, you can go to optomecast.org and take a look at it. This is where you're going to be applying. This is the site you're going to apply to. It's a lot of information on that site. We do have a lot of resources for you where you can see all the schools' requirements for background checks, requirements for letters of recommendation, uh, information about who has supplemental applications, etc. Take your time, read through it. You do have an essay, like I said, 2 essays that are prompt for ICO. Sometimes students get caught up in those essays and that they try to make them what I call a quadruple plus. Realize that your opinion of your essay will change. You'll read it today and feel like it's great, and tomorrow you don't like it and you want to start over. Really focus on answering a prompt and realize that you're not going to be able to tell your full story in 4,500 characters. Realize that there are other places for you to add some of your story, and also that your interview day can be where you share more of your story as well. So make sure it's a nice solid letter. Maybe use your writing center or friend or family member to review it. But just make sure it's a nice solid letter. And lastly, when it comes to the CAS, applicants can see when their letters of recommendation have come in. Don't feel like you need to wait to see that they've been in to go ahead and officially submit. You can do it without that. Typically, letters will sort of catch up, if you will, by the time your application gets verified in terms of your transcripts being reviewed. Usually your letters have hit the system, so don't feel you need to wait. Once you do hit the status that's called verified, that's when that admissions office gets to work with your file. We'll review Michael Green's file and place it into one of these 3 buckets here. Of those 1,000 plus people who applied last year, I don't remember the exact number, but I know it was over 700 people got invited to interview. And we ended up interviewing about 400 and I think 30 people last year. And I want to say maybe accepted, I want to say 360 or so. So you get invited to interview, definitely have some good qualities in your application, a lot of strong points. And so, look at that as a positive and come in and do well in your interview. And even when you look at the numbers, I mean, a good majority of people, of course, you interview, they get accepted to the program. The next bucket, the hold bucket, pretty straightforward. Like I mentioned earlier, if we see someone who maybe we want to see their grades, just put their file on hold and ask them to update OptomeCast with the results. Maybe we see somebody's taking the GRE, and this happened to me this week. I imported the next batch of files and saw somebody was taking the OAT actually this weekend. Well, I'll just actually put their file on hold and ask them to send me the results after the exam. So depending on how close you are to taking the OAT to when we're reviewing your file, you may be put on hold for that. I also had somebody in that group who their OAT testing date was in December, and I knew we had interview slots between now and then, so I invited them to interview. What will happen in most cases is that, if not actually all cases, is that once they interview, we'll put them on hold for those December results. So you can interview without having your OATs in. You can apply without having your OATs in, and the same thing for your prerequisites. They typically, your prerequisites will become a condition of your admission should you get accepted. I'm going to deny, it is just that if there's an applicant who numerically, their application is at the sort of the very tail end of the scale, if you will. And in that cycle, there's no room for improvement. An application can be denied. So, so that's sort of our review process. Any questions about any of that? All right. Interview day, pretty straightforward, to be honest, in person or virtual this year. Last year was all virtual. When you're in person, of course, you're going to have a chance to do a campus tour. You'll get a chance to do lunch. We do have some 360 videos and tour videos on our website, or actually on our YouTube channel. But if you go to that white.ico link that I put in the chat, that'll take you there, and you can see a lot of those videos as well. It's pretty straightforward, but I think the biggest thing a lot of students will say is it open file or closed file? It's open file. We will have read your information that you submitted throughout Timecast or submitted to admissions. It is 45 to 60 minutes long, and it's really more of a conversation. You'll find that it's not me just asking you a question and taking some notes and then asking another question and going a list. I have my questions, but it's definitely engaging. You ask questions, definitely come prepared for that. But it's a way for both of us to get to know more about each other. And hopefully sort of be a match in the end, in that we accept you and you accept our offer. So pretty straightforward. I would say if anybody ever is concerned or nervous about doing an interview, see if your university offers mock interviews, or you can even Google, like questions to ask, that gets asked at a professional school or optometry school interview. What we want is you to be sort of authentic and not have like canned responses. Typically, some interviews will ask about your strengths and weaknesses, and don't feel like, you need to have sort of a verbatim line remembered. Again, it's a conversation. So, come in and you can talk about your strengths as well as your weaknesses and how you're going to improve them. So again, it has more of a conversation flow, and it's one-on-one. We don't do any group interviews where it may be several, a couple interviews or interviews and students against one student. Is always for us one-on-one, unless we have a faculty member training, and then you may have two, but one person tends to be who's doing the learning, tends to be more quiet and more observing the interview. So just a couple of tidbits, and this a lot of this is really more recruitment related. We have a summer program that we do each summer on our campus. So if you're interested in more information, it's on our website under admissions and then under events. This too is coming up next June. We just had one in October. I say if anybody's applying for next cycle, highly recommend you attend. It's an opportunity for you to speak to the representatives from all 23 schools and colleges of optometry. We usually have students there, faculty there, admissions is there in a virtual setting answering your questions. So definitely feel free to take a screenshot, but I'll send this information in a PDF as well. But it definitely is helpful for you as applicants to, even if you can't make it to like the whole thing, or you can't make it to like the very end, if you log in, you have access to a chat that has started from that morning. So you just don't come in at your point. You can scroll and just read. And a lot of students do. I would say in the morning, when it first starts, there are no questions that have been asked. It's a lot of questions. But usually about 11 o'clock, students just come in and they don't type anything. And we know that you're just scrolling and reading, because a lot of you all will have the same type of questions. So it definitely is a good resource for you to engage with other programs and get information. So as I mentioned, we have some different events coming up next summer. Hopefully things will improve with COVID and you're able to come sort of into the US freely, if you will, and engage with us on campus. We are hoping to have some type of open house in June 2022. We haven't had one in a few years now. Their summer program is scheduled to be in July of 2022. But if you can't make it in person, definitely virtual is something we can do. And like I said, we'll be more than happy to do counseling sessions with any of you. So here's our contact information. Feel free to reach out to us. And we're just here to help you answer questions, make connections, like I said, to students, and go from there. So I'm sort of officially done with all I wanted to say. Do you guys have any questions for me? I did that good that I answered everybody's questions. I'll pat myself on the back if I did that good, but I also know that sometimes it's a lot of information to process. And after doing this for 15 years, I definitely know I think that like the key points to try to hit on that most students will ask. But lastly, I'll just say, if you're on social media, I know not everybody is, but if you are, definitely, follow us. Like I mentioned, the blogs, our blog link is here. But also, if anybody's on Instagram, feel free to follow us as well. We have a lot of our current students do Instagram takeovers, so it gives you a chance to sort of see a day in the life of some of our students, even though we have a day in the life series on our YouTube channel. But it's definitely a way to get to know ICO a little bit more. I feel like our presentations are formal in a sense, but this really gives you a chance to sort of see the student body, student engagement from their perspective and what life is like at ICO for students. So with that, I am all done. Now I'll do my stopping of my screen sharing. So any questions? If not, again, no pressure, no worries. You all can, you guys are probably at home. I can go home, relax a little bit. But you know where to find me. My email is there. If anything comes up, like I said, feel free to reach out to me. If you need any type of resources, we'll be more than happy to help you. But it was great, sharing with you a little bit about ICO. I think a lot about ICO. But like I said, if you have questions, feel free to reach out to me. You guys have a good evening. All right.
Oh, thank you so much. You did answer like my questions as they came up, and I was like, perfect. Now, like, you know what I mean? You killed it. So thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you. That's good. That's good to know, because I feel like either I'm off base or I'm there and get everything you guys need. So that's my whole goal. But like I said, definitely reach out to us if you have any other questions. All right.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so
All
much.
right. Thank you. Thank you for your time.